there's the motor, and there is the pulley wheel there. So the transmission is on this side, so I'm going to have to be able to get my drive chain onto the shaft here, which is where I'm going to connect. I've taken the side off the machine, the motor is here, there's the drum and the drive to it. I'm going to lift this concrete off because we don't want that, that just makes it heavy and a waste of time, and the same the other side, so I'm going to have to take the other side panel off. These are the support frames that are holding the structure rigid, and I've got to somehow get my transmission along here, either from the front of the machine or from the rear. So once I've attached the drive cog to there from the bicycle, then I'll know what the line is like. But at the moment it looks like I might have to put this sprocket quite far out to miss the two supporting sides of the machine. What is really important with this type of machine, it's something you should look at if you're going to do it yourself, is realise that the side panels are an integral part of the structure. And if you look at this here, look how flimsy this is. So we are going to need to brace this side when we're going to leave it off, I hope anyway, for the drive to be working. But that is really flimsy, and in fact the sheet metal side to this machine is an integral part of the structure and its stiffness. So that's something you really have to consider, is that if you start taking things off, you may have to put something to replace it in form, whether it's a strut across the side here or replacing the whole panel again, just because that's what makes it stay up. Just look at this here, some years old, beautiful bearing, still running smoothly, wonderful seal on it, perfect. And it actually lends a line mechanically to the rest of the machine, which in itself is nowhere near as robust as this component here. So that's something you have to look at. This is an important part of the machine. You could actually do without the rest of it really, but I'm going to try and keep it because it's a nice way of carrying it about. Again, with the front loading machine, this part of the drive projected outside the frame of the structure, and that was really useful when I wanted to put the bicycle attachment to it, when I connected the chain to it. And this is the problem now, is that this flywheel is sitting inside the structure, which is a lovely bit of compact engineering, but it's not going to help me a lot. So I'm going to have to work out how to offset the sprocket so that I can get the drive just outside the line here, so I don't foul the metal with the chain. This is a bicycle that I intercepted just before it went into the skip at the dump. It's not a brilliant piece of machine as it stands at the moment, but it is going to power the washing machine quite nicely, I believe. I've now removed the motor, which is a pretty heavy piece of metal. That is one of the reasons to have the concrete weights on. And I'm now going to remove the 4 bolts that support the concrete blocks and take that off. They're pretty free moving because they've not corroded in. It's only that one that's got a bit of rust on. And I can see a tiny fracture in the concrete block there, which doesn't bode too well for its future life when it was running. Nice little 8mm bolts there, which are always worthwhile keeping. Now at the moment the weight of the block is being taken on these 2 supporting ears, so as long as I hold the block in at the top, it shouldn't fall down onto my feet, he said, hopefully. So let's see what it does. Yep, that's the first one off. One concrete counterweight. And the only reason to have those, besides to counterbalance the motor weight, is that when the thing spins up to its high RPM, you have to damp out the vibration, otherwise the whole thing bounces about. With the bicycle attached, I'm never going to achieve more than 1000 RPM. I'm never going to get near to 100 RPM, so perfectly okay, no need for it, it's just surplus weight. I'll now have a look at the other side of the machine, and for that I'll have to take this side panel off. So I'll set to, get it out and see if I can get access to the other concrete block. One thing I've just noticed, and I meant to say before about removing the side panel, is that at the front face of the machine, just at the bottom here, there is a screw to remove before the side panel comes off, otherwise you won't be able to remove it. So always look for hidden, in this particular case, bolts that are going to make it difficult for you to remove anything. Let's get the side panel off now. Yes. There's 3 little ears, plastic ears, and I noticed yesterday when I got that side panel off, hey presto, it broke one of the ears off. Not that it matters. Right, there's a second concrete block and a load of pointless wiring for the heater, which we're now no longer going to use, so I'm probably going to cut out a lot of that. You can see how the drum is bouncing about now because it's on these suspension springs. And what I'll do, and one of the things I noticed with the old design, was that the drum wasn't adequately anchored, so that with the turning moment caused by the drive mechanism of the bicycle, it was actually twisting the whole drum and the chain would slip off the sprocket. So what I intend to do is fix this drum in position a little bit like they use for the bracketry for transporting these kind of washing machines. So it locks the drum in position so it won't bang about when it's on the lorry. Well, we're not achieving the speed that would be normally necessary for it to rattle like that. So I'm just going to secure it in one position so it's fixed and we won't get the problem with the chain sliding off the sprocket. Right, another 4 very useful 8mm bolts, and let's see if we can get him. He'll come. There we are. And the machine is almost floating. It is really incredibly much lighter. So when it's on its fixed pallet, what I will do now, because I can actually move this, instead of 2 of us having to move it, I can move it myself very, very easily, is I will anchor it to the pallet so that the bicycle chain will not pull it towards the bicycle, so it will be fixed down. All in all, very satisfactory, nicely removed, and well, it's about a shopping bag weight now, so not heavy at all. The other thing I should point out before we go any further, besides the dust at the bottom of the machine, is the pump. For emptying the machine, we're not going to use the pump. Obviously it's not going to be connected electrically. We just use good old Newtonian gravity, i.e. you just need to lower the drainage hose below the point of the machine and it will empty. Now the pump is not going to do a lot, it's not going to impede the flow very much. With the other machine I had a leak in this tube, so I actually connected this tube directly to the drain outlet, but I shall leave it as it is at the moment, keep it as simple as possible. It will run out through there. So emptying is no problem, but just remember to pick the hose up before you start putting more water in. I've had an idea about how to stiffen up the drum, and what I need is some metal brackets. Now rather than going out and cutting some metal, I have things that could be suitable here, but they're in the concrete. So wearing safety glasses, pair of gloves, and a fairly light hammer. I'll just split the concrete and see what these brackets are like. They may do the job, and that will mean I won't have to go and look for some steel. So let's just give it a gentle tap, or perhaps a not so gentle one. Well, there's a suitable length already. Oh yeah. Right, well all I need to do is break the rest of this concrete off. These seem to be attached to a steel frame which is supporting the concrete, so if I cut those off, hey presto, I've got 4 brackets already drilled with the right size hole to fit through the threaded hole on the side of the drum, and I can attach that to either the front or the rear panel of the washing machine, and that should stiffen up the drum so it won't twist when I start pedaling. That's good news. So another little bit of handy recuperation there. So there's all the 4 brackets revealed to the light of day, and now I'll just get the hacksaw and separate them from their parent. Timber! And there we are, 4 very serviceable metal brackets, pre-drilled. They just need a second hole and they need to be bent into position, but very, very useful and free. I'm now ready to measure up for making and putting the brackets in place. Prior to doing this, what I've done is I've just put the washing machine, it was already on a pallet, but I've also put it onto a support board which I've levelled. So now the washing machine is actually sitting dead level. I've checked it with a spirit level. That means that the whole thing is suspended now plumb vertical, so that the brackets will be holding it in the position where everything is in its most relaxed state. It's a nice way of just keeping everything not under tension. It just wants to be clamped in place so it's nicely at rest. There's nothing going to be forcing the metal plates out of distortion while it's just sitting there doing nothing. So now I'll measure up and make these brackets. I've put the first bracket in, there he is there, and that's made the whole thing already quite nice and stiff. So now I've just temporarily put the second bracket in and I've measured the whole position requirement, and what I'll do now is I'll drill it with the pilot hole and then open it up. And now I'll go through the 8mm drill. I've just temporarily put the bracket in place, and I'll just mark through from my hole centre and go and drill that by holding the bracket in the vise. There's the bracket in position. I've now got the brackets bolted with washers to the front and the rear plates of the washing machine, and it is now very, very much stiffer because in effect we've made the drum part of the structure, so it's really stiffened the whole thing up. What I want to do now is measure the offset I need for the chain wheel, which is my driving wheel, to be outside the perimeter of the machine. So I'll just do that by putting a straight edge against the front and rear faces, bearing in mind that the panel's got to go on this, so I know I've got to be slightly more than that, but at the moment my clearance is, I'm going to need well, that's saying 19mm, or round about 3/4 of an inch. Well, I want to come out, I would think at least double that to give me a nice working clearance. So yeah, I've got a dimension now, so I'll just see what I've got to make up a packing piece to throw that chain wheel out. I've got a piece of wood which is pallet wood. It's 25mm, 1 inch thick, and it was quite wide, so I've cut a square, and I actually think just that thickness alone will be enough. It'll be a bit close to the side wall, but I believe it'll be okay. So I'm going to mount the chain wheel to it and see what it looks like when it's actually on the machine. Just mark the centre position of the piece of wood, and in the centre I want to drill the mounting hole to fix the flywheel. Now the little washer can stay in the flywheel between the wood and the flywheel face, so I need a clearance hole for the bolt. Well, actually, matter of fact, I don't. I need a clearance hole for the bolt socket, so that is the diameter I'm going to drill, or near enough, so that I can access the mounting bolt. So I'm going to drill it out with a 16mm wood bit. There we are. One thing I've just noticed, that when I place the wood onto the flywheel, it's rocking a bit, and no matter what I do, it will rock. So I had a look at it, and I think it's because of this very crudely cast part here, which is proud of the surface. So I'm going to file that off before I do anything else, and then see if the plate will sit flatter. I think it will. Yeah, I've just filed it flat, and in effect now I've got no rocking of the wood, so it's going to be nice and flat when I screw it on. What I've got to do now is drill screw mounting holes in the flywheel so I can put the screws through from the rear to screw the wooden block on. I've just realised that I don't need to have a square piece of wood, so I've just lopped the corners off the piece I'm going to use, primarily because that's going to have to be the size of the hole I'm going to cut in the steel side, and I think the smaller the better. I'm just going to drill the first 3 mounting holes into the flywheel, but I think I'm then going to turn over and drill 3 more closer in. There is a torsion, or there will be a torsion on this when it's working, and as I'm using wood screws going into this, I'd like it to be pretty stiff. It's a nice soft alloy, this. As I've got a reinforcing point there, I'm just going to go through the centre of it. That's 6 mounting holes cut in the flywheel. Now the other thing to do, I don't need the flywheel, so I can trim off these arms, and that will bring everything within to the proportions of the mounting block. Because this is now superfluous. We're not going to use a belt anymore, so I'm going to just trim these off with a hacksaw. I've just temporarily clamped the block of wood in place using these clips, so that I can turn it upside down and just put the first couple of screws in. Sure it's still central. Now it's moved a little bit. Oops. Lovely. It is quite fiddly to get this right because it's shifted 2 or 3 times. It's not going to now. So there we have it, all ready to have the arms trimmed off, and then we can mount the chain wheel. Okay, I'll just use a junior hacksaw because it's easy to access. There we are. I'll just file those edges off. We've got it, there it is mounted, ready for sticking on the machine on a frisbee. What I need to do now is measure the position of the centre hole from, let's say, the 4 edges, but 3 would be enough, so that I can transfer that dimension, those proportions, onto the side panel. Then I can scribe the hole and then I can cut it. So the plate fits on the inside edge of that front panel, and it's at 26.5 centimetres. It goes to the outside of this one, so similarly it's 29.5, and it butts up to this top edge, so I can get that. I'll transfer those dimensions onto the pat plate and mark the centre. So from the top edge, let's measure it again, 32. Front edge, and the third dimension should confirm that it's right. It's measuring from the rear, 29.5. Well, it's a millimetre out, which I'm not going to grumble at. That's pretty good. So that's my centre. So now I'm going to have to draw my cutting circle sufficient to allow this lovely geometrical shape to pass through. Now I've got it marked, and I've just confirmed that the dimension from the base to the position is correct. I'm just going to mark a little centre point, and then my old college instruments out, and I'm just going to draw my cutting line, which, if my measurements have all been correct, will give me a clearance hole for my curiously shaped piece of wood. So I'll drill a couple of starter holes here and then get my little saw out. I've drilled 2 clearance holes, hopefully for the blade, and I've just put the whole plate at the side of the machine onto a pallet so my saw blade won't foul the table. Now we come to the acid test. Does my little block fit in the hole I cut? Lovely stuff. Got a nice clearance there between the face of the sheet metal side and the wooden face of the block, so when I put the sprocket on it will be nicely clear. So I made my first and I hope my only mistake on doing this build, and that is I'd cut the flywheel away from the centre before I'd marked the position for the sprocket to sit on. So this chain wheel has to be central to the pivot hole, the central hole here, otherwise we'll start to get a little bit of a wobble. So I'm going to get it as accurately as I possibly can. I've put everything back together again, so my joints are lined up. What I can do now is just measure certain key points on there and check the key dimensions and make sure that I am concentric. I think I've got an easier method. What I've done is just put the block into the mounting hole and then drawn 3 concentric circles just by spinning the whole shaft and then just holding a pencil. So I should be able to line the outer edge of the chain wheel to one of these 3 concentric circles, and that should give it a pretty accurate concentricity. We'll see. So now it's running. I'm pretty happy with that for the concentricity, and it's securely mounted, so I'll put the other side of the machine on and then we're ready to start on the bicycle. I've stripped all the excess accessories off the bicycle and I've replaced the saddle to the one that we had in the old bike. I'm just supported the bicycle on the old stands just to get a feel for the new stands that I'm going to make out of wood. Everything looks fine, and I've got the same pallet. This is about, well, it is 140 centimetres long. It's slightly non-standard, but it's compact enough. Everything fits on there nicely and I'm quite happy with that. The one thing that I've noticed is that being a top loading machine, the handlebar is going to foul on the lid when I open it, but the lid's in a very bad state of repair and we don't need it, so I'm going to take the lid off and eventually replace it with just a wooden cover which can slide off, and that will work quite nicely. So the other thing I'm going to do first of all is to make the mounting so that the washing machine will be fixed to this pallet. I've now got 2 planks cut, which will do for holding the machine in position. I've turned the machine over and I'm going to take out the 4 adjustable feet on the bottom of the machine because again these are 8mm bolt holes and I happen to have some 8mm bolts, so that will bolt the planks to the bottom of the machine and then I'll be able to drill holes in the planks which will then bolt onto the pallet. I noticed that the 2 front feet have been bent, they have been inclined a little bit inwards, so I've just put one of the recuperated 8mm bolts out of the machine into the hole and I'm just going to persuade it to go vertical, and that's it. I've done the same already at the rear, but that now means that the bolt will now go in squarely when I put the plank on. Okay, there's the last bolt going in now, nicely recessed below the lower face of the wooden plank. So now I can go and carry it out and position it on the pallet and drill the holes on the pallet for it. Right, those are the 2 support planks on the machine. I put it on the pallet and already it's really solid, it's really firm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 mounting bolts through here and I'm going to slot them and they'll be able to give me adjustment for the chain tension. At the other end I'm not even going to bother with any bolts because the turning action effect will be to try and lift this up as I cycle, and therefore the front bolts are superfluous. So I'm just going to drill 2 holes in here and then I'm going to slot them. ready to make the wooden supports for the bicycle, and they're going to emulate the metal ones in the fact that this is going to be a triangular format. And again, I'm going to support the bicycle through the wheel spindle using the threaded bar. I've cut my uprights to length. I've cut 4 pieces of wood, and I've just clamped 2 together underneath the drill because I'm going to drill the support hole right the way through the 2. So hopefully it's going to be nice and square and they'll be in line. One thing to bear in mind, it might be an obvious thing, but just make sure that you know your dimensions of where your hole should be. There are, or there can be, parts of the frame that could foul if your wood is too long, especially from the hole to the end of the support. Anyway, let's drill these. Because I've got the bicycle very close to the washing machine, my one vertical support at the front of the bicycle will have to be set in to the support. So I've cut a joint which I'm now going to glue and screw and leave overnight. But that will mean that I can get the bicycle very, very close to the face of the machine. On the other hand, I could have offset that chain wheel on the machine further out by using a bigger block. So I'll just put the glue on. Make sure it's staying square. Yeah, that'll be right. So here's the finished front support. It's asymmetric in the sense I'm going to hook the bicycle here and on this face. This will mean I can get it as close as possible to the gear. I've put in this diagonal support as well to stiffen up this joint, and it's glued and screwed, as is the vertical joint here and the joint the other side. I put the whole thing onto support planks so that this will stretch across the pipe. I've also put this plate in as well, just to keep the 2 supports square, parallel and vertical. So quite an elaborate support, and as a matter of fact I found it easier to weld than I did to fabricate that in wood. But nevertheless, if that was the only resource I had, and I'm using that at the moment, you can make it. And it is solid and it is rigid, so there'll be no problem. For the rear support brackets for the bicycle, I've screwed the uprights to a rectangular block, and just so that I can fit in my bracing piece here, I've screwed an additional piece of wood as a packing piece so that everything will be at the same level. Here's the finished rear stand. Obviously more centrally mounted, glued and screwed,